I'm still reading Jon Meacham's And Then There Was Light. And what I'm noticing is another style of the Lincoln story being aligned with the redemption of America and redemption of racism for whites, basically a redemption for white America. And that narrative is so strong in United States history and politics and culture that whites aren't this bad group of people and that they are inherently a good group of people and have happened to make some historical mistakes, but they have fixed them. And that narrative is so pervasive in American culture, in media, in art, and literature that it's not odd that Lincoln is the most written about character in history, only second to Jesus, which we could say we know that is a historical, the story of Jesus, the Bible, is a historical, foundational piece of literature that is pervasive in white supremacy as well, up to the iconic rendering of Jesus and the portrayal of a white figure as God. And There Was Light, Pulitzer Prize winner, Jon Meacham. Again, I as a historian, Jon Meacham is where, on the level of creativity and writing, I would like to be. I put a lot of stake in awards, in accomplishments, and I'm not going to act like I don't. And I am not trying to disparage Jon Meacham as a historian or an author. He is done in doing what I'm trying to do. But as a scholar, I find some parts of his work troubling or aligned into American popular culture as opposed to really getting to the root of history and deriving the circumstance and the reality so we can create a timeline of truths that show us how we got to where we are. And if our timeline is faulty, our end is faulty. So are we making a timeline to fit what we want today to look like? Or have we missed something because the information in a lot of Lincoln history books doesn't align with the outcomes of who they're saying Lincoln is. Now, at one time, they just didn't put certain things about Lincoln in Lincoln books, like his dedication to colonization, his indifference to Black people. They really don't mention still his indifference to women's rights. That it's not covered heavily in Lincoln books, his atrocities that he led on Native American people, and the role that he played in Western expansion, which was land improperly taken away from Mexico, which he did initially support. That was an improper use of United States power to take the Mexican lands. And I've pointed out in subsequent Jon Meacham videos that he is using a technique of adding in characteristics and stories of Lincoln that have no relationship or effect to how he got to be president and the decisions that he made. And I'm not saying don't put that in the book. It's your book. What I am saying is, why did you put it in there? Why are we being told stories of a Lincoln who was almost robbed by some Black people, and then immediately, literally, the next sentence is how he saw some slaves and his heart bled for them? Why is that constructed that way? Now, this is an almost ingenious writer, okay? Again, Pulitzer. That structure is there for a reason, that these Black people almost robbed him one time. And I'm going to follow that up with this story that he saw these Black people in bondage, and oh, it hurt his heart. When there's much more information that Lincoln was completely indifferent to the reality, situations, the circumstances of the violence of slavery, the culture of slavery, and what Black people had to go through. In fact, in his address on colonization, he said, yeah, you all probably have suffered more than anybody, and that's really not what I'm here to discuss. It just wasn't his issue, and that's fine. But these books are making it his issue. And in particular, it's not just that. Okay, so we have this connection and tie to Black people that just was not there. The 13th Amendment, as it's written, it does not protect Black people. The Emancipation Proclamation, the preliminary version of it, was trying to send people out of the, send all the Black people out of the country. He tried to make that the 13th Amendment to ship Black people out of the country in December of 1862. And then and he had gotten money to do it from Congress. But once it didn't take off, he switched and took out the part of shipping the Black people out of the country in the Emancipation Proclamation. And he only emancipated certain Black people. And then in the 13th Amendment, he moved slavery from the public sector to the state. It says that you cannot have slavery or involuntary servitude except if it has been done so by a judiciary. That if you have been found guilty of a crime and adjudicated. That's how it is written now. So in all Lincoln legislation, all Lincoln racial legislation, he protected slavery. Even the 13th Amendment, as it stands, the courts decide who can be a slave in our country. It just so happened we have the highest incarceration rate, and it is disproportionately affecting the same group that chattel slavery affected. That's just facts. And anybody can say, oh, well, oh, well, oh, well. That's just facts. Numbers don't lie. But as I was going through chapter 3, I believe I'm on, I noticed something else. There is this constant, significant coverage of religion in Lincoln books, in this one in particular, to a man who was not religious. He just wasn't religious. This is, and the funny thing is, and they do it the same way that they do with his egalitarianism, this, this equalitarianism. that is suggested, even though they say he was not an egalitarian, he was not an abolitionist, but I'm going to tell the story as though he was. Why am I talking about religion and how much he read the Bible and how he led sermons with his brothers and sisters when he was little, when it is across the board in so many cases clear that he was not a religious person? He enjoyed the Bible. He enjoyed the Bible as a book. But there's a bunch of cases where he articulated himself. No, I'm not really down with the church thing. I'm not down with the religion thing. I read information and process it how I feel. I believe in God and I find value in the Christian doctrine, but he was not a Christian man. So why? Again, I'm not going to say don't put it in there. It's your book. But we can't say, okay, why is that there? So now we're going to say, why would a prolific writer put this information in this book? Well, is that again an alignment with the United States? We're trying to, the book is dedicated thus far showing how feeling he was, saving a family dog that nobody else would have saved, and he went and got in water and got the dog, and the dog was so happy. That story has nothing to do with him as president or him debating Douglas politics, anything. Him giving sermons at playtime with his brothers and sisters, nothing to do. But we have to make him good, godly, all of the things that the United States, which we think about it, United States, in God we trust. Now we got slavery and all of that, but in God we trust. Women don't have any civic rights, but in God we trust. We committed genocide on Native Americans, but in God we trust. And that's what they're doing with the Lincoln story. Yeah, he did all of this stuff, but he read the Bible all the time. And even though he had issues with the scripture, he was constantly reading the Bible and constantly telling people about the Bible. And it's like, that's why this significant portion of this information is in here. They're not talking about Lincoln. They're talking about the United States. They are describing him with the qualities that the country projects on itself. They're projecting them on him. Which takes us back to my assertion that the popularity of the story and the untouchability of the story is because the story of Lincoln in popular culture and history has become the story of America. And to critique the story of Lincoln or to change the story of Lincoln, you must critique and change the story of America. And that is not good politically for our nation. And that is why the better story that achieves that goal wins the Pulitzer. It's not that it was the most accurate. It's not that it was the most thought-provoking. To be honest, this book is not much different than David Herbert Donald's. Not much different than Eric Foner's. Not much different than Edna Medford. But why is this Pulitzer? Because you told the story we want best and right. Not the story of what it is. Now, my goal is to go through these texts and identify why, what is where, and compare them to the primary sources and see what is the most likely outcome based on words and actions. And as I am reading Jon Meacham, and again, nothing but respect for his accomplishments, and that's accomplishments I wish to hold one day. So this is not personal. This is completely scholarly and academic. But as we go through Lincoln lore, we have to ask, how much does this story even align with what Lincoln said about himself? Why do we have chapter after chapter going into religion, or a snippet here, a snippet there, just throwing religion in there, keeping our minds on this being a Christian man? Even though he said he's not Christian, but he's always reading the Bible. And if he were a non-Christian man that read the Bible, why are you not talking about all of the books that he read as much as they talk about the Bible? They do talk about, oh, he read this book, he read this book. But they're going back to the Bible. The Bible, the Bible. This nation built its economy, slavery, on the Bible. Its authority and justification for slavery, for genocide, for lying, for stealing, all the other atrocities that came along with making this nation that we made, was endorsed by the Bible, or those who used it. So I find it funny that the Bible has such a, amongst the other elements that I pointed out, that the Bible is represented as a foundational piece to Lincoln, just as it's a foundational piece to the United States. A man who was clearly not religious.